Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate 101 podcast. Excited to see you all this afternoon. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus recently just because of all these life events that have taken place in my life. You know, we had our first child in May, and we've started a new brokerage, and there's a lot of other moving pieces. And so, you know, we haven't released in probably about 2 months now, but we're really excited to reestablish and invigorate the podcast with a phenomenal guest, Alan Buchanan. We actually got a chance to he was on another podcast that I run as well. We interviewed him just a couple of years ago now, which is kind of wild to think that it's been that long. But ever since then, you know, we've periodically kept in touch online, and we actually met in person for the first time recently at an event we hosted here during this SIOR conference. So Alan was in town for the SIOR conference, and we did an event in the evening, and it turned out really great. And it was really great to be able to catch up with Alan, and really excited to bring you back on the podcast and talk a little bit about what you've been up to over the last couple of years, and also highlight a little bit about the book that you've just recently released, which I'm really looking forward to reading. It's on my reading list, so I'll definitely make sure to read the book this holiday season. So excited to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you too. And it was the event you hosted across the street from the SAR conference was remarkable. Bob Knackel and Rod Statomosimo did a book signing for Selling Buildings, and it was really cool to meet you in person, meet Will, and see all the exciting things that are happening in downtown Louisville and how you're being a large part of that. So I just am so happy for what the future is going to hold for you.
I appreciate that. And, you know, it's a process like anything else, but it was just really cool to be able to meet so many people from all over the world. And that's one of the cool things about SIOR is that, you know, you run into people from, I mean, at the event, we had people from Europe, we had people that came in from Canada and Central America. So it was really great to be able to meet so many different people that really are top professionals in their field. And it's really great to be able to, you know, just again, build the network in the community. And so obviously we appreciate you know, coming to the event, and it was great to kind of engage with you in person for the first time, which was really cool. But as far as the podcast is concerned, obviously this is the Commercial Real Estate 101 podcast. And so a good percentage of our demographic are brokers that are just getting started in their career. Maybe they're getting into their career, but you know, they're still trying to build and achieve momentum in their commercial real estate brokerage career. And so, you know, that's kind of the premise of some of the people that are ultimately listening to this podcast. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then what got you into the business.
Thank you. I grew up in a family-owned and operated business. We manufactured soft drinks, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, Pepsi, and Texarkana, Texas is where I grew up. I actually grew up on the Arkansas side of town. But my career path was to come home from school, take over the family business. About a year before graduation, my dad said, "Hey, I'm not going to hire you because you don't know squat." Except he didn't say squat. He said, go get a job with a consumer goods company, and then we'll figure out where we go from there. So I was devastated, to say the least, because I'd really planned on going back to Texarkana, doing the business I'd done for 3 previous summers. And so I had to kind of pivot, you know, figure out what does the next chapter look like? Who am I going to work for? Should I go to law school? Should I go to grad school? Should I, in fact, go to work for a consumer goods company, which is ultimately what I did. Went to work for Procter & Gamble Distributing Company, one of the greatest companies in the planet. They moved me to Northern California. As soon as I got to Northern California, I realized that I'd made a bad error by not asking the woman I love to marry me. So I remedied that very quickly. We were married 3 months later. And so we've been on this journey together for the last 46 years. Commercial real estate came around because what I didn't realize with the consumer goods business, especially national consumer goods companies, is as your responsibility grows, so does your time on an airplane. And I found myself away from our young family too many nights a week. And so my wife and I decided to take a step back, resign from the consumer goods company. I was working for a large wine manufacturing distributing company at that time. So I decided to take a step back, take a look at maybe what was available. I knew I wanted to sell, but I didn't know quite what I wanted to sell. But I knew I wanted an unlimited income potential, didn't want employees, didn't necessarily want an inventory. So I looked at wealth advisory, insurance, software, some of those fields. Happened upon commercial real estate through a family friend. And it was very fortuitous, providential and fortuitous at the same time. I found Lee and Associates. We had 2 offices at the time. Now we have 85. And it was just a great, it was a great step. It was exactly what I was looking for. And yeah, I've been doing that since 1984. So 41 and a half years.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's kind of,
it is amazing when I think about it.
Yeah. It's kind of a story arc that you see a lot of people who get into the industry have, is that for some people, they get right into the business right out of college. But for a lot of people, it tends to be a career that they pivot into. And I don't know if it seemed to be, based on your story, it's similar to you, that you had no real initial thought about getting into commercial real estate. It just so happened that one of your contacts happened to know someone in the business, and you spoke to someone, and you just decided to take that leap of faith. And ultimately, it's led to a very prosperous career over a long period of time. But I feel like, especially nowadays, it's gotten a little bit more open with information sharing, because at the time, I'm sure when you got into it, it was somewhat of a opaque industry, and unless you really knew someone, it was a little bit more difficult to get in. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll draw a parallel here. It was an interesting time because a lot of the companies, and the few that I interviewed with were the exception, but you had a lot of companies in the commercial real estate business in Southern California that had been started by, let's say, the patriarch of a family. Mm-hmm. And now we were on the 2nd or 3rd gen. And, the Charles Dunn Company comes to mind. Cushman, that was a precursor to Cushman and Wakefield, I believe, fell into that category. The Sealy Company fell into that category, and there are others. But it's interesting. We're kind of seeing a return to that, as a lot of us are getting up in age, and we have now kids, in some cases grandkids, that are in the business, and so it's really cool to see. But yeah, it was very much a walled garden. You had to know someone that was willing to take a risk, and as you know, there's very little risk because they're not paying you. Mm-hmm. They're giving you a desk and a phone and potentially some of their expertise, and saying, "You'll get them, Tiger." But yeah, it was the wild, wild west when I started in 1984, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe talk a little bit about that transition, and then we'll get into more of the nuances of how you've approached your business over the last 40 years. But jumping from a business like consumer goods, I mean, and Procter & Gamble has a phenomenal reputation of it being a market leader in what they do, and their training programs are world class. And a lot of people would view that as being kind of the mecca of a career, but ultimately the lifestyle was a big reason for your decision to transition, as was kind of one of the reasons why I transitioned from what I was doing before. They were moving us every couple of years to a new place, and it's just not very sustainable over a long period of time. But maybe talk a little bit about that decision, and then ultimately maybe talk a little bit as well about when you made that shift. How did that first year or two look like, and how did you kind of adapt to this new reality?
Yeah, I was fortunate, as you mentioned. Procter & Gamble Distributing Company, one of the best companies on the planet, as I mentioned. Phenomenal training program. They used to send us back to Cincinnati, not too far from where you are, and we'd spend a week in intensive training. And I was fortunate to do my new representative training course after I'd been in the business for about a year. And so it was a perfect time, because I had lots of reps that I could recall and use as examples in my mind as I went through the training program. But I felt like I was a good salesperson. I felt like I was organized. I knew how to dress. I knew how to attend a meeting. I knew how to set objectives and goals and things of that nature. So I felt like I was well prepared for any sort of professional sales career. What I underestimated is, with both of my previous engagements with Procter & Gamble and then with a large wine company, the customers were there. And so you called on existing customers. You didn't have to go out and find clients. You didn't have to go out and find customers. And versus a lot of folks that got in the business in the 80s and 70s, they worked for Xerox, they worked for IBM, which were professional sales organizations. But in those regards, you had to go out and find clients. You had to cold call, you had to knock on doors, you had to do things of that nature. And so I'd never done that. And that was new. But I adapted to it very quickly. I really, really enjoyed it. I like people. I like talking, as you can tell. And so it was like a duck to water for me. Once I learned the lingo, once I was sort of pointed and shot, in other words, go this direction and hit these people and tell them about this. I really adapted very, very quickly. And the freedom was remarkable. The ability to be creative, the ability to work with whomever you want, however long you want, was very refreshing. Real estate's always really appealed to me from the standpoint of it's a very interesting asset class, and I was I just gobbled up every amount of information I could get about industrial buildings and industrial occupants, industrial owners, underwriting development deals, which there were a fair number of when I started. So it was an amazing time in our lives. Also, one of the scariest times of our lives because we went from 2 very good jobs with benefits to 1 very good job with benefits, which was my wife. We had some savings. We figured we could last 12 to 18 months without me making a dime. But 2 months after we started, we discovered that she was pregnant with our second child. So now the clock's ticking, and we knew that working with 2 was probably not going to be as possible as working with 1. And so I knew I had to get busy, and failure, frankly, wasn't an option at that point. So, that was our first year.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, and you talk about a couple different milestones, right? You talk about a career transition, you're a young father, and then now you find out there's another one on the way that will likely impact your all's decision about how you approach both of your careers. And so, I mean, that's a lot of things to have to digest early on in your career. But that's how character is built, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Very, very, very true. Yeah. And once again, people ask me, well, what was it like starting? And I was fortunate that I had really given it a lot of thought as to what I wanted to do and my quote unquote why. And I counsel young people in the business today. I said, man, if you don't really understand why you're doing this business, you ought to rethink why you're doing this business, because the quickest way to becoming unsuccessful in commercial real estate business is to not have a proper why. A lot of folks say, well, gee, I want to make a lot of money. Well, that's great. I mean, you can make a lot of money in commercial real estate, but you can also make a lot of money doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
You make a lot of money being an HVAC contractor, being a software designer, being a YouTube influencer. There are a lot of different ways to make a lot of money. This is a grind, and you better be prepared to work your backside off for 2 to 3 years without a lot of return.
Yeah, no, and that's
and I don't have to tell you that. I've watched your steady progress, and what you're doing in Louisville, Kentucky is remarkable, and what you're building and have built is remarkable. And I think you've been very transparent, sharing, how your first 2, 3 years in the business have looked from a revenue standpoint, and you're just starting to really hit your stride. If I recall, this is your 4th year in, and you're really 4th year with in the business, correct?
5th year,
and I think
5th year. Yeah, I think I just finished. No, actually, no, I just finished my 5th year actually. So yeah, it's to your point. It took a while. I always tell people my first year I did 13,000. I made $13,000 my first year. So it was not very good at all. I mean, really. And that was right in the midst of COVID, and you're kind of trying to contend with all the things that were happening around you, and no one wanted to do business because they didn't know what was going on. So it was a tumultuous time, but I think, to your point, I went into it understanding that it was not going to be easy. And I think there's a lot of people, I think people do a disservice sometimes when they say, oh yeah, like look at all the things that I've been able to do, but they don't tell you, oh, this took me 10 years to get here or 15 years to get here. So every time I meet with younger agents, I always kind of share that story and say, hey, this is what I did my first year. You could hit it out of the park your first year, but I would say it's better to prepare for the worst but hope, and hope for the best, right? I mean, you want to mitigate the downside risk so that you're able to stay within the industry, because frankly, if you're able to stay in the business for a long period of time and do the right things day to day, you're eventually going to hit, some semblance of what you consider to be success. And success is going to be different for each individual. So,
without a doubt, I was talking to, I've been tasked with doing training for our associates within Orange County, part of Riverside County, part of Los Angeles County, which has just been phenomenal. So I have 20 students, and they range in tenure from, I think, one young man's been in the business for 2 months, and one or two have been in the business a little over 5 years. So there's a vast amount of difference here. And I was talking to one of the ones that was in his first year, and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to get through this first year, and then it's kind of a downhill slide from there, right?" And I said, "Well, not really." I said, "Frankly, in my experience, your third year is your toughest year." And he goes, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Well, think about it. I mean, think about what you're doing now, and I would say 70-80% of your focus is on finding new business, and you're out there, you're talking to people, you're making contacts with the hope of making a relationship. Those relationships start to blossom the tail end of the first year into the second. You start to reap a few rewards in the second year. You make some deals that you've discovered in the first, but the thing you forget to do is you forget to prospect. And so now the third year dawns, and you've had a decent second year, and you look up and you don't have anything to work on your third year." And so I said, "Please don't make that mistake. Please figure out a way to time block prospecting to every single day, regardless of how busy you are with deals, and that will pay dividends, significant dividends going forward."
Definitely. No, and that kind of leads us to the real purpose of this podcast, was to focus in on how people can build that type of career over a period of time. And you having had a very successful career over 40 plus years, and then relatively recently deciding to codify some of the lessons that you've learned into a book, Sequence, which will be an exciting read. I'm really looking forward to diving in. So maybe we can touch on some of the lessons you've learned over your career, and ultimately, how people can utilize some of those insights to ensure that regardless of what stage they're at in their career, that they can continue to build momentum and advance in and achieve whatever level of success they decide they want. Because it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be different for every single person.
Exactly. And I just happen to have a couple of dozen copies handy here. So
nice.
There it is, the Sequence.
Yeah.
So the Sequence is a double entendre. I really like things with two meanings. And the first meaning of the Sequence, the steps of a commercial real estate deal. And if you think about the 6 or 7 or 8 steps that are involved, you first and foremost have to source a deal. You then have to evaluate it. You have to qualify it. You have to get it under some semblance of control. You have to execute your plan. You have to negotiate, close, get paid, and expand your win. And so I came up with these steps when our son-in-law, Joshua, came to work for us in 2014. And I needed a way to explain to him, all right, here's a commercial real estate transaction, and here are all the things that we do from soup to nuts to get a deal closed. And it was very insightful for him. Now, I didn't call it the Sequence at that time. That was just, it was just the steps of a commercial real estate deal. But every single person we onboarded from 2014 on, and that was, I think, probably a half a dozen people on our team, everyone got the same sort of indoctrination of, hey, here's a commercial real estate transaction. Here's how it starts. And you're going to see deals in various stages. Maybe something's in the execution stage. You're going to see me making cold dials. You're going to see me having networking meetings and what have you. And all of those fall in this continuum called the Sequence. So that's meaning number one. Meaning number two, which in my mind is the bigger meaning of the Sequence, is the steps of your career, the steps of your life, where you choose to live, what you choose to do for a living, who you choose to love, who you choose to worship. All those things are foundational in creating a successful career. And if you think about, your career, you're married, you have a beautiful little girl, and I believe it's a little girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
you're at that foundational stage of your life, and you're going to make choices as to whether you're spending time with your family or you're spending time doing commercial real estate deals. And the consequences of those are going to play out throughout your career. I happen to be very faithful. I happen to be a devout believer in Jesus Christ. That was a decision that I made very early in my life because of some traumatic event that occurred. And that faith has allowed me to have a North Star, have a guiding principle, have a fallback on anything and everything I've done, every decision I've made. So I would encourage your listeners and anyone that picks up that book, read it as that is the intention. It's not just a tactical book. Okay, here's how you close a deal. Here's how you sell a building. Here's how you lease a retail center. It's really more of a framework. It's a journey. It's decisions that help shape a successful career over decades.
Yeah, that's great. And it's funny you say what you said just now, is because I just created another video that I'm going to be releasing tomorrow about, fatherhood and commercial real estate. And because that's a foundational principle, with a foundational point of your life that you kind of have to, come to into being with, and then also find a way to make sure that it weaves into the other part of your life, which is your career. And you talked about having to make decisions about your career and commercial real estate and your family. And there are times where you have to kind of contend with that. And how do you manage these two countervailing, obligations, which you want to be present in both. But in order to really be present in both, you have to make sure that each gets the appropriate amount of time. And hopefully you can also interweave some of that into your family life at some point as well. So it seems to be, what you're saying in particular with certain aspects of this book is that it is truly a guide to help provide people perspective about how do you manage and create a life that incorporates your day-to-day, your business, and hopefully you can achieve or have a life that you ultimately want to achieve. And it seems like as well, because I did look at some of the synopsis as well, that you do provide at least a basic framework about how to structure your business to be able to accomplish your whatever success you're trying to achieve. But ultimately, this is a framework to follow. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Absolutely right. And I go into great detail about contrarian decisions. I call them contrarian decisions because at the time I made them, they were very not, let's call them, they weren't mainstream decisions. I mean, one of the decisions I made early on, Raphael, is moving to California. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand where I grew up. I mean, you're in Kentucky, you understand this. Some of your listeners may not, but from where I grew up, California was perceived as the land of fruits and nuts. I mean, why on earth would anyone live there? I mean, it was Hollywood, it was glitz, it was glam, it was all a big sham. And, the politics at that time where I live weren't even that liberal. They were very, very conservative, believe it or not, in Orange County, California. But making a decision to move to the Bay Area, Northern California in 1979, when I did it, I mean, no one was doing that. A big move for someone that graduated from the University of Arkansas was to move to Dallas, Texas. Man, if you did that, you were a hitter. And here I was moving across the United States to San Francisco. So that was very, very contrarian. My wife and I got married when I was 22, she was 21. And we never lived with each other. We fell in love our senior year, and we decided to get married the summer after our senior year. We got married in September. So we literally dated for 6 months. And 3 of those 6 months, I was in California. So you think about what are the chances that marriage is going to last more than a year, with a divorce rate as high as it is. So that was very, very much a contrarian decision. It was at neither one of our parents, neither one of my parents, neither one of her parents. My parents were divorced. Her parents were about to be divorced. Neither one of them could give us their blessing for the marriage. I finally sought counsel from my 90-year-old aunt who had been married for 63 years. And she was the only one I could think of that would really give me transparent advice about getting married at a young age, because she had. And she just said, "Hey, do you love her?" And I said, "I do." She goes, "Then marry her, period. Over and out." But that was very, very contrarian. Looking back, she has been the greatest mentor, supporter, friend, companion that a man, mother, wife, that a man could ever have. And I just believe your support system, your family, your wife, your husband, your kids, your friends, that has to be there in order for a career to be successful. Otherwise, there's going to be a leak, there's going to be a blowout. It's not going to end very nicely. So, contrarian decisions, I go through a great deal in the book. I also talk a lot about mentors and how important mentors are at every stage in your career. I had a mentor that frankly pointed me in the direction of commercial real estate. I had a mentor when I worked at Procter & Gamble that was a phenomenal communicator in the written word. And he taught me how to communicate in a business fashion. And I hated him at the time because he made me rewrite things dozens of times, but he had a way in which he wanted things done. I believe to this day, that's why I'm the writer that I am. Mm-hmm. I had early mentors in the commercial real estate world. That one was just an amazing guy that taught me how to qualify deals. And another was one that said the deal ain't done till the broker gets paid. So he was just this fanatic about all the steps and getting things to the closing table and beyond. So, and I've even had recent mentors. One of my most recent mentors was with the Massimo Group with Doug Molyneux. He was my coach for 5 years. Phenomenal mentor. I, to this day, talk to Doug maybe once or twice a month about things that are going on. So those are foundational, once again, to helping you form a successful career, regardless of what you do, commercial real estate or otherwise.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you referred to your wife as being kind of the best decision you've ever made. And frankly, that's the same in my life. And I feel like having someone who you can be fully transparent with and vulnerable with and kind of share in the successes, the failures. I mean, that's ultimately what makes life meaningful. And also too, sometimes, my partner, she's great because she'll call me out on stuff where it's like I'm doing something that I maybe have not really thought through all the way because I'm just so siloed in on getting things from point A to point B. Sometimes she'll say, "Well, did you even need to do it? Like, is there even a reason? What's the reason for this particular decision, and why are we going down this road?" And a lot of times it's been like, you know what, you're right. You made, you're kind of putting me, you're providing me within a different perspective and a different way of looking at things that I just would never have been able to do. And I credit a lot of my success, at least early on in my careers thus far, to her support and also her perspective. Because I don't think I think I would have fumbled around a lot more had it not been for her. So it's
I would be an absolute mess. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
She, like yours, sounds like yours has the ability to hit you right between the eyes.
Yes.
And mine has the same ability. And,
well, that's it's done with love, because I feel like, and that's another thing too that I feel like is important to say, is that the people that you love ultimately aren't just going to always tell you what you want to hear, and if anything, they should tell you what you need to hear versus what you want to hear.
Very true.
You don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of yes men or yes women. It's you want to be around people that make you want to be better and want to grow. And hopefully your partner has the desire to want to see that, I would assume, because in that case, they're going to call you out when you're not doing the things you should be doing, or maybe you're not perceiving the whatever's in front of you the right way, or maybe you just need a different perspective to look at it, so that maybe you approach it from a different angle. And so, I think that it's a great insight that you shared regarding your partner, because it is truly an important piece of the puzzle. So
yeah, maybe the most.
No, I would say it's number one for sure, no question.
Yeah, closely, faith and family, mm-hmm. and I wouldn't pretend to rank them, but I do know that she and I share faith, And without faith, I don't know how anyone gets through life, period, much less commercial real estate career, marriage, all the things that we've done throughout our lives. But yeah, it's critical, truly.
Definitely. And so regarding that, I mean, how do you kind of balance a lot of this stuff out? Because I feel like, in this, I'm actually going to be releasing a video tomorrow about this, where I'm still trying to find the balance with now being a new father and now having, my, a firm that now I'm, not only trying to be an individual producer, but now you're trying to grow a team and expand your reach. And, you talk about continuing to want to serve your clients and build leverage. And so I'm kind of curious about how you've been able to do that over your career. And I mean, again, you've had such a illustrious career and obviously gained a lot of insights. So I'm kind of curious if you could share some of the things you've been doing in your day-to-day to handle that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. And I get, it's interesting, Raphael. I get this question quite a bit, and I get it from folks that are about your age, that are about your stage in the business, about your stage in their marriage and in their fatherhood. I just wrote a LinkedIn post about this last week, and I think for me it kind of fell into three categories. And I didn't realize these three categories as I was going through them, but as I've had a chance in my late 60s to reflect, here's what I've come up with. And the first is this, and this is going to sound trite, but you really have to be present for the important events. And sometimes an event ends up important and you don't even realize it is important. But my wife explained it to me this way. She goes, look, I realize you're not out drinking at the bar. You're at the office at 7 o'clock and you're trying to close a deal that's going to provide income for our family and enable us to do things and support our lifestyle. She goes, but just understand this. Your kids don't know if you're drinking at a bar or if you're closing a deal. They just know you're not there. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I took that to heart, and consequently, I made it a point to attend things, practices, games, recitals, scout outings, church events, those kinds of things. I just flat calendared those, and those were non-negotiable. And those were just non-negotiable. So that was number one. Number two, what enabled me to do number one is that when I was working, I worked. I didn't BS. We didn't have computers at the time, so I couldn't scroll social media, but there were other diversions. You could stand by the water cooler and BS half the day if you wanted to. So when I was working, I worked. That meant I was on the phone. I was negotiating deals. I was making cold dials. I was knocking on doors. I was having strategic marketing or strategic networking meetings, et cetera. That's what I was doing during the working hours. And then, the final piece of that is you have to put what we do in perspective. We're not heart surgeons. We don't send people to the moon. Although I think you used to be an engineer, so maybe you did send someone to the moon.
Not quite.
But commercial real estate deals is not a life and death matter. So at the end of the day, it's going to be there tomorrow. And if it's not there tomorrow, it wasn't meant to be in the first place. So those three things have really enabled me to kind of strike that work-life balance. There's an awful lot talked about these days. There's no such thing as a work-life balance. I call BS on that because I'm a living example of work-life balance. Now, have I made as much money doing what I do as I could have had I put my sole focus on my brokerage? No, of course not. Am I incredibly financially comfortable to the point where if I said go tomorrow, I wouldn't have to work anymore? Absolutely. But what I do have and what I'm proud of is I've been married to the same woman for 46 and a half years. We have three incredibly educated, very resourceful, very successful kids who have found wonderful life partners, and they've produced 6 wonderful grandchildren and another one on the way. So, is that worth more than a few $1 million in the bank? in my mind, that's priceless. That is absolutely priceless. But that doesn't start after you've been in the business for 20 years and you flip a switch and go, okay, now I'm going to be a family person.
Mhm.
That starts when they're your daughter's age.
Yeah.
You know, and you go to that dance recital when you go, shoot, I've got a deal that's exploding. I really need to be at the phone dealing with that. Once again, she's not going to know if you're at a bar or if you're closing a deal. She's just going to know you're not there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad we talk about this because I feel like there's not as much. I mean, again, and understandably, I think there's a lot of, people out there that focus in on just solely focusing on the business. But what people fail to realize is that it's not just your business, it's your life, right? And life should blend together with your business in some capacity. But I think that what I've also value from what you said is there's no such thing as really work-life balance. And there's Jeff Bezos. One time he mentioned that he likes the term work-life harmony, where there's going to be times in your life where you're focused in on your business, and there's going to be times in your life where you're focusing on your family, and there's vice versa, and merging of things together. But at the end of the day, remember why you're doing this, because
Right.
if you were just solely focused in on, growing your business to the moon, and you're leaving everything else by the wayside, I don't know if that necessarily leads to long-term fulfillment and success. I mean, I think that it does require you to focus in on your business, but also put the time you need to with your family, and also spend some time in spirituality and be able to really connect with something that's greater than yourselves. Because we're only here for only a short period of time. So
Right.
I think we need to kind of maximize the time we have on earth. So.
Yeah, and I'll just give one other quick example. So I was fortunate. I coached both of our boys. We have 3 kids. We have two boys and a girl. I coached both my boys in Little League, and they played on the same team. And so we'd have practice, let's say on 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Well, at that time, cell phones were in your car. You didn't carry them around because the ones that you carried around were enormous, and they didn't really have the phones that you carried when I was coaching Little League. And so my boys knew that we would have practice. Dad was there. Dad was the coach. But they also knew that when we got in the car to go home, that Dad was going to be on the phone from the time we left practice and until the time we got home, returning calls and basically wrapping up the day that I had left in order to coach baseball. Mm-hmm. And I had one remind me of this the other day. He says, Dad, he said, I'm not in the commercial real estate business, but I feel like I sort of am, because after every practice, we'd hear 5 or 10 conversations with you on the other end. And in some cases, they would hear both sides because I'd have it on speaker. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way that I was able to achieve, some semblance of balance, whatever that means, in being able to be present for those important things, but by the same token, serving my clients.
Definitely. No, that's some great insight to share, and reinforcing the fact that, you're obviously building a business that we all ultimately want to achieve success in, but also making sure you spend time and prioritize your family and scheduling those non-negotiables. In your case, it was being at the dance recitals, the Little League practice, depending on what your kids are and whoever you're listening. I mean, obviously you may have your own non-negotiables, but making sure you spend some time really focused in on fostering those relationships with your kids and your family, because again, they're the ones who are going to be, help you along your journey. And ultimately, as you get older and they start having their own families, then it creates this great dynamic between you and your kids and ultimately your grandkids. So that's really,
and it goes so quickly.
Yeah.
It goes so quickly. I mean, our oldest grandson now is 10 years old.
Wow.
And it seems like just yesterday he was toddling around our house. They live 2 doors down from us, and so we've cared for him his entire life while his parents worked. My wife, I say we, my wife did. And but I was a big part of his early life and still am. But man, it just goes so quickly. Just so quickly. And once again, you're not flipping the switch when they're 10 and saying, okay, I'm going to be this great papa. You're doing that when they're tiny, when they're pains in your backside, nice pains in your backside. but that's when you're creating those relationships.
Definitely. No, I appreciate the insights there. So, regarding, this time of year where we're at right now, it's kind of closer to the end of the year. There's a lot of people that are looking to, kind of hit the ground running in Q1 and make sure they can kind of plan out the next phase of their career in 2026. And I'm kind of curious if you could share some insights about how you have taken that approach yourself. And then maybe we can touch on some of the, just the ways to properly structure your next year so that you can obviously achieve whatever level of success you want to in that year, but also prioritize some of the topics that we discussed today as well.
Yeah, we're doing some really exciting things for 2026, and these all have gestated in the year of 2025. And I'm a bit older than you, so I'm maybe at a little bit different stage of my brokerage career. But yes, I still am a very active broker. I still set a goal, an income goal for next year, and I have a whole mechanism for achieving that. Probably until I was in my late 50s when I started being coached by the Massimo Group, did I quickly gain an understanding as to how you properly plan a year. I could never quite understand how you could say, I'm going to make X amount of dollars. I just never understood how you could do that. And Massimo taught me that you can in fact do that. And the way you do that is you have a keen understanding of your metrics. So, things like, hey, how many deals did I do in 2025? And what was my average deal size? And what were what were the sources of those transactions? Did they come from referrals? Did they come from prospecting? Did they come from inactive clients? Did they come from some other means, social media, what have you? And then tailoring a prospecting campaign geared around the source of that business. And if you're steadfast in tracking metrics, in other words, how many calls do I have to make to get a completed dial? How many completes do I have to make to get a meeting? And all down the line until you get to a closed deal that results in an average transaction size of X, then you can plan your year accordingly. So I have that whole piece of my 2026 plan that I do every December. And so that plan's in place. I try to set 3 goals a year, and these are broad-based goals that then have a bunch of sub-goals that allow you to achieve those goals. But so my first goal is my income goal from a brokerage standpoint for 2026. We just talked about that. I then have a personal goal, and our personal goal is this year we will take 2 trips with grandchildren that turn 10. We have one that's 10, one that turns 10 next May. And we told our grandkids when they turn 10, we'll take them anywhere in the United States that they want to go. Just the 3 of us, Nana, Papa, and the grandchild. And so we have 1 trip planned for May, 1 trip planned for November. Our oldest grandson wanted to go to the Florida Keys and fish for 5 days. So we're going to the Florida Keys in April. And then our second 10-year-old wanted to go to New York City and Philadelphia and in the Northeast. So we're going to do that with them. And so then there's a business goal, there's a personal goal, and then I try to do what I call a development goal. And for me this year, the development goal is going to branch into 2 areas. The first area is I'm authoring book number 2. And book number 2 will be geared toward the folks that I serve, family-owned, family-operated manufacturing, logistics businesses, and owner-occupants of commercial real estate. And then I'm also developing, through my work with the associates in our company, a complete training program, which will have 31 sessions. And involved in that are some office appearances, an appearance of what we call our Lee University, which is a 2-day training course for 100 associates throughout the United States. So 2026 promises to be a very, very bountiful year. Can't wait.
Yeah, that's exciting. And the way you described your thought process regarding the different goals that you set for yourself is also very helpful, because I think it does require you to sit down and really think through what you want, and putting metrics and different things to be able to, ultimately get those goals achieved. And it does get to a granular level where it's like, what am I doing on a day to day to ultimately get to
Exactly.
where I want to go? Because it's not, you don't just
Exactly.
wake up the next day and ultimately get where you want to go, unless you have these dedicated steps every day that you're taking to get to where you want to go. And
Exactly right. And it makes it so clear cut. And, I try to help the youth within our company, and anyone that'll listen to me. I try to help them understand that, because, they say, gee, what do we do? What do we do day to day? And what Brian Tracy would tell you is, what you do day to day is you work on your goals. You have the broad overarching goals, but then, to your point, on a quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly basis, then your time is allocated toward achieving those goals. And it just becomes such a seamless process. Now, does that ever get derailed? Of course, life happens, but at least you've got that broad plan as to how you're going to spend your waking hours.
Yeah, no, great advice. So maybe talk a little bit about as well about the book that you're going to be writing, because I one of the things that I've always appreciate about the insights you share, because you've been getting more and more active, and you've been active really on different mediums to be able to share insights with brokers, but also people who are in that category that you're describing. So maybe touch a little bit upon that book that you're planning to write, and what exactly is it centered around? Is it centered around helping them decide how they want to proceed, whether that's the disposition of a property, acquisition of a property? That'd be kind of helpful as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I wrote this sequence, I had 2 or 3 books in my mind, and I couldn't really decide which one I wanted to write first. Mm-hmm. And I was in a training session in Atlanta, Georgia, and one of the producers raises his hand and he says, "Hey, why don't you, when are you going to write a book about this content?" I thought, shoot, there we go. There's my audience, commercial real estate brokers. And here's my content. It's going to be about, steps of career, steps of the deal, all that combined. I could clearly see the end product, and I got busy and wrote it. So it was really, really great. The other book that I have in my mind is, I want to write a book that caters to the folks that I serve. Family owned and family operated businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, go through different stages. They go through different generations. They go through heartache. They go through joys. I was able to witness a fair amount of that growing up, because I grew up in a family-owned business. So it makes me remarkably well credentialed,
or suited. You're well suited to be able to handle
to speak that. Thank you. Well suited to speak that. Plus, that's the genre I've served throughout my career. So I have written a blog called Location Advice since 2009. That was my very first foray into social media. And I have 966 blog posts about all different topics. So I'm going through and trying to figure out if there are any similarities in these posts that I've written. So some I've written about leasing, some I've written about owning, some I've written about selling, some I've written about buying, some I've written about challenges, tactics. So I'm in the process of getting all those blog posts organized in sort of chapter systems. And then once I have them organized in chapter systems, I'll then edit them to rewrite them so that they're continuous chapters and not just, little 500-word columns. And that's what I'm doing. And frankly, it's tough. It's tough, even though that's the advice I provide every single day. It's not as easy as writing the sequence was for me. And frankly, I don't know why, but I've just found it to be remarkably difficult.
Yeah, and it could be too that it's such a a large swath of data that you've been able to issue over a long period of time, just trying to filter through and refine what the ultimate message is going to be for that book. I mean, that I'm sure that's not an easy exercise to do, because as time evolves too, what was provided to as insight in 2010, there may be some additional information that you would like to add to something along, because now as the world changes and the world shifts, now there's new insights that maybe are garnered that would add color to a piece of content that was created a decade ago. So I mean, I can definitely see how that would be a challenge, but that also goes to show that, the insights. They're just amazing to see the commitment over that last 15 to 20 years of actually creating tangible content that now will come into an actual physical copy that people can glean from. And I'm really excited to be able to follow along with that journey as well. And maybe once you have that going, once you actually get the book released, I'd love to maybe re-engage and try to see if we can have you back on to talk through that, because I think there's a lot of insights I'm sure we can garner from that as well. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would welcome that opportunity, and I'm excited. I've gotten through, I think, a chapter and a half, and the chapter that I've produced, I'm really proud of. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm really happy with the product of these blog posts and marrying them into a cohesive message. And also just going back, like to your point, over 16 years, and looking at what I was writing about in 2014, 2015, and looking at some of the pandemic posts that I made, and some of the things that were happening during that period of time. And so it's been really cool to relive some of those portions of the career.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. So, so what, I guess last question before we open it up to Q&A. I mean, what are some of the final lessons that maybe there are questions that I didn't really share or ask in this particular podcast episode that maybe you wish I would have, or is there anything else that you think would be of value to the audience?
You're a very skillful interviewer. You're a very capable host. I think we nailed it. I think we hit all the points. We discussed the book. We didn't talk about the market very much. The market tends to be pretty, market. It means something if you're local. It means something if you're local. If you're in Louisville, Kentucky, or Poughkeepsie, New York, maybe it doesn't mean as much. But yeah, I'm very passionate about the youth in our business. And it dawned on me, there's a passage in scripture that reads that, God calls us to help the least among us. And I always thought that sort of meant, for folks that were less fortunate, or maybe didn't have the financial wherewithal, something like that. But it dawned on me that, hey, the least among us, and it's not that they're lesser people, but they have lesser experience. And so that really fired me up to be a mentor, a trainer, a speaker in terms of sharing that expertise to the next generation in our business. So I'm very passionate about that, and very excited to see where that's going to take us in 2026.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I'm really excited to see what the response is from this podcast as well. And we'll make sure to distribute it on all the different platforms as well, so it'll be available for everyone to listen. But, well, Alan, I really appreciate it. What I'll go ahead and do is open up to Q&A. So if you guys are watching this either on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, feel free to type away and ask your questions. We're really looking forward to hearing your all's feedback. So we did get a question from Jason. See, he got here super late. Well, it's okay. You're still on the feed, but so he was asking if you are writing another book, and that is in fact correct. He can verify that on the call or on the podcast today. So
yes, and for those of you who know me, once I commit, I'm committed. So that will definitely hit the airwaves in 2026. I'm not going to commit to when in 2026, but it definitely will. And it's well underway. I spent I've got my calendar time blocked so that I'm writing. I have certain times that I write, and that's the way I was able to get the sequence knocked out as quickly as I did.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean that I feel like that's the best way to do it is you commit to time blocking and writing, or you commit to a word count. That's what I did for a long time. Is up that's like 250 to 500 words, and just over time it just adds up. So that's great. All right, we'll give it another minute to see if anyone else has any questions. All right. Well, it looks like you may have answered all the questions we have thus far, but Alan, obviously we greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I'm excited to see, like I said, what the feedback of this particular podcast is, and I'm really excited to follow along with what you're doing in 2026. If people want to learn more about what you do and engage with you online, or even reach out to you if they have any commercial real estate needs in your market, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I'm active on LinkedIn, Alan Buchanan, Alan with an E. Active on X, once again, Alan Buchanan. I can't remember if X is Alan C or LinkedIn is Alan C, but very active on both of those social platforms. I do a YouTube series weekly called Tuesday Traffic Tips. I'll record one here when we hang up. And if you'd like to follow that, that would be amazing. Those are little 1-2 minute snippets of brokerage advice I produce on a weekly basis. And then email is abuchanan, Buchanan, at lee-associates.com. And then my mobile number, if you want to text me or call me, is 714-624-3896. And I welcome any and all comments. Call me. I'm happy to chat with you, and happy to connect. And Raphael, I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing. And once again, you are an incredible host, and I love what you've built here, and I hope your listeners find great value.
I appreciate that, and the honor's mine. I really am thankful for the opportunity to continue to build, to get to know you and talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your progress in 26 and staying in touch, because I'm sure at some point in the near future we'll probably cross paths again in person, and I'm really looking forward to that opportunity. And we'll make sure to include all that in the show notes as well. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, go ahead in the description and you'll access that. And if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, again, it'll all be in the description for you. So
great.
Alan, really do appreciate your time. I thank you again so much for being on the podcast. For those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It makes a huge impact on our ability to reach a broader audience, and we greatly appreciate the support. Along with that, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcast or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. The more people that ultimately can listen to the podcast and leave a 5-star review, the more reach we'll get, and more people can learn about the many facets of commercial real estate. So thanks again so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.